Hello and welcome to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Lee Odden, CEO of Top Rank Marketing. And today, our guest is someone that I first saw this summer at a thought leadership event in New York. And we were recently able to spend some time together during Content Marketing World, where we both had a first-time experience eating gold-covered beef. I'm talking about a leader in the world of thought leadership, co-author of the ROI of Thought Leadership with Anthony Marshall, and the co-founder of the Global Thought Leadership Institute. Today, we have Cindy Anderson, Chief Marketing Officer and Global Lead for Engagement and Eminence at the IBM Institute for Business Value. Welcome, Cindy. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks, Lee. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. I don't know what time it is in Singapore, but it's very late. um, and speaking of Singapore, you have roots in the Midwest like myself, and now you are there in Singapore, and you've been with IBM for about 5 years. And you have a history of working in thought leadership, and I'm kind of curious if you could share a little bit about your career journey as it relates to thought leadership.
Sure. When I was in college, I thought I was going to be a journalist. I quickly realized that those kinds of deadlines were not my strength. And so I moved into marketing. I've done a lot of work in PR, but thought leadership is really where my passion is. And when I was at the Project Management Institute, I was asked to build a thought leadership capability by the then CEO, Mark Langley. And I loved it. And we used it very effectively to build the awareness as well as consideration and just the eminence of the Project Management Institute. And I've really been an advocate of thought leadership since then.
Well, it seems that thought leadership is something that, especially in the B2B world, is increasing in importance. In fact, importance overall in marketing and how brands are engaging with their audiences. Um, and you've defined thought leadership as distinctive, evidence-based intelligence that gives business leaders the insights they need to make better decisions and also the inspiration to take action. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, how does thought leadership reconcile with disciplines like content marketing that have similar objectives at inspiring their audiences to take action?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get that one a lot, Lee. And there are really three things about thought leadership that set it apart. So I would say thought leadership is a really kind of niche part of content marketing. So it's content, and it is used as a platform for marketing. But there are three things that set it apart. One is that thought leadership requires data. It requires research, and we can talk later about the kind of research, but it requires some sort of independent or second or third party research that forms the basis of the opinion, of the perspective. The second thing is really the perspective, the subject matter expertise, the point of view, the insight that comes from both that research basis as well as the experience that a subject matter expert or that organization insight can provide. And the third thing is really that inspiration to act that you mentioned in the past. The other thing I would mention that's really important for thought leadership that's not part of content marketing is independence from the commercial aspect of the enterprise. And that's really important. So content marketing is really designed to generate a lead, right? Or build a next best action. Thought leadership is really designed to, as you mentioned, help executives make a better business decision, because we think that if we can help them make a better business decision using the data and the insight and being independent of a product or a service or a commercial aspect, that will then generate trust and authority and credibility, which lends itself to a future sale, but not directly the way content marketing does.
So I have a question to ask you about your book, and as someone who it's kind of meta, it's a thought leadership book about thought leadership, and And but it's a fantastic book, and I highly recommend everyone check it out. The ROI of Thought Leadership. The findings on the impact of thought leadership are striking, right? 87% of all executives made a purchase decision in the last 90 days based on thought leadership that they had consumed. I'm kind of curious, why do you think, or what did you find was the reason that it's been so hard for so many companies to measure the ROI of their thought leadership activities?
Well, it's a great question, Lee, and I think the reason Anthony and I decided to go down this path is we got really, really tired of having to justify our existence every single day. Those of us who work in marketing, who work in thought leadership, are really familiar with that sort of questioning. Why are we spending money on this? What's the return? What are we getting for it? Could we be better off spending our money somewhere else? And we said, we deal with this every single day as thought leadership practitioners. We take a business problem and we solve it through research. We ask the target audience what they think about the problem, and then we analyze the data and create insights to develop the answer. So we said, why don't we do that with this business problem, right? We're getting asked, what is the value that we provide to the organization? Let's ask the people who use it. So we did. We asked 4,000 C-suite executives around the world in a series of interviews if they used thought leadership, if they did, what they used it for, whether it influenced their purchasing decisions, how much it influenced their purchasing decisions. And to your point, 87% said that in the last 90 days, they could trace back specifically a purchase decision that they made that was based on some piece of thought leadership that they consumed, which was astounding. We were stunned. I mean, we knew it was valuable. Of course we did, because that's why we do it every day. But to have the data that proved the value that we deliver to an organization and quantified the impact that thought leadership can have for a producing organization, which, as I know we're going to get to, is 156% return. But also there's $265 billion of purchasing globally that's driven by thought leadership itself. And it's kind of invisible, or it has been until now.
Exactly, exactly. We're gonna do our best to make sure it has
We appreciate
visibility
that.
everywhere. Exactly. Um, there's quite a few concepts in the book that align really well with something our agency calls best answer marketing system. And that's because the landscape for, content credibility, content experience, and content discovery is really changed. It's changing now, right? Especially because of AI and consumer behavior changes and evolution, and that's as relevant for thought leadership as it is for anything else. And I wanted to ask in particular about a concept that aligns well with that in the book, called the hub and spoke model of thought leadership, right? And how that can create a multiplier effect. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talk about the hub and spoke in a couple of different ways. One is with the content itself. So um, the most effective thought leadership is really around it is built around is built on a platform, and that's why we call thought leadership the eighth P of marketing, which is the platform, right? That other campaigns can be built on. But the hub is really that one piece of content, that robust piece of research that you really want to produce and own as your organization, no matter how big your organization is, right? You can own a perspective that's based on research and that's, amplified with subject matter expertise. And then from that, you can build a number of different content pieces as these spokes, um, which which allows you to make one investment and leverage that investment in multiple different ways. The other way we think of hub and spoke is with the function of a thought leadership perspective, a thought leadership division,
Mm.
which is the value of having a group of people who are focused on thought leadership, potentially within a marketing department or within a comms department or within a strategy department, or wherever it fits, But in both of those ways, the hub and spoke model can really influence the ability of thought leadership to build pipeline, to create awareness, to enable consideration, which is what we all try to do with thought leadership.
Cindy, you're kind of talking about what we use a metaphor for this, and that is that and thought leadership, or original research, or research based thought leadership. I guess they're supposed to always go together, but research based thought leadership is an engine, right? It's an engine for so many different things, not just obviously putting out a research report, but a flywheel of derivative assets and content formats that can be customized to the audience that they'll be most relevant to, right? Um, I guess that's why we have a new report coming out called Answer Engine. So that's why we picked that word. At Content Marketing World, you and Anthony presented, and it was really great to meet Anthony as well. And you positioned thought leadership as the eighth P of marketing, and you shared some really compelling statistics, like the one you just mentioned. That thought leadership delivers a ROI of 156%, 16 times better than traditional marketing campaigns. Like, wow, that's striking. And I'm just wondering, with results like that, it's tempting to suggest that a lot more of marketing, B2B marketing, should be thought leadership based, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
We fundamentally believe that in particular B2B, B2C can use thought leadership too, but it's a little bit tougher to figure out how it fits. For B2B marketing, I mean, if you think about it, McKinsey, which is sort of the grandfather of thought leadership, right? The McKinsey, the big consulting firms, the McKinseys, the BCGs, the Bains, they've been using thought leadership for 60, 70 years, and they don't do other kinds of marketing. So they know it works. That's how they've built their business. They sell thought leadership. They sell the leaders. They sell the concepts. They sell the brains of the people who work there. And the only way they can get it out there is if they tell people what those people are thinking, right? So they know it works. But the rest of us who aren't the big consultancies have to prove it. And so that's why we decided to kind of undertake this activity, which is, to quantify the value that thought leadership can deliver as the platform for marketing. And we're not suggesting that there shouldn't be any other marketing activities. There should absolutely be campaigns that are built on top of the thought leadership. But if you're not starting with the foundation of a really strong hub, like we just talked about, of thought leadership content, some kind of anchor piece, anchor research, anchor perspective that your organization can own, then you're just not going to be able to generate the ROI that the big consultancies and that others are achieving. And we think that every B2B organization has that opportunity. There's $265 billion globally, $100 billion in the US by itself, that's up for grabs, right? It's up for grabs. Everybody can get a piece of that pie if they build a strong thought leadership program and then put their marketing activities on top of that, use it as the platform.
it's interesting because there's also a level the playing field situation here too. So I'll take my own company, for example. We started doing influencer marketing for B2B companies for and with some great logos like Dell and LinkedIn and SAP. And, we're making some progress. But when we did original research and published a research report about B2B influencer marketing, and then use that as the basis, as an engine for marketing that included a podcast, blog post, speaking events, contributed articles, and just the driving conversations in the marketplace, especially with walking the talk and activating influencers about influencer marketing. And wow, I mean, now what happened? Well, we became known as, and given more credit than maybe we deserve, in pioneering B2B influencer marketing, because we've done this report for 5 years in a row. And it's amazing. The application is for companies of any size, I guess, is my point. And I appreciate what you say about that. So you're really a walk the talk leader. when it comes to thought leadership. Obviously, with the book and with the institute and your role at IBM, and I want to drill down a little bit into the Global Thought Leadership Institute and what its mission is. So you're the co-founder there, and Anthony's there too. Um, who's the audience? Like, what's the goal for that organization? What's the mandate?
Yeah, I think the reason that we decided to found an association for thought leadership producers is because of the impact that thought leadership has on business. Honestly, Lee, we were a little surprised by the scale and the scope and the size of the impact. Obviously, we knew it had impact because we wouldn't be doing what we do every day. We wouldn't believe in it the way that we do. But the actual impact that we were able to calculate was surprising. We sort of looked at each other and went, "Did we do the math right?" And so did a lot of math, and made sure that our calculations were valid and that they were credible and they were supportable, and they are. They're real. This is real numbers. This is real dollars that organizations have the opportunity to earn, based on using thought leadership as the platform for a marketing program. And so we said, this is important. And then we started kind of talking to our colleagues and talking to others and, kind of looking at LinkedIn, and there's hundreds of thousands of people that list thought leadership in their LinkedIn profiles. And we said, you know what? There's a there there. There are people out there that I think could really benefit from this. And we looked at each other and we said, if we had had this earlier in our careers, gosh, wouldn't it have been a lot easier than having to justify our existence every day? So let's see if we can help the folks that are coming up behind us, by building out kind of a professional community of thought leaders who really believe in the impact that thought leadership can deliver to organizations and, using that platform. So that's why we did it. I think the our goal really is to embed the perspective of thought leadership as that platform, through development of standards. We just actually introduced our first standard for public comment. We're building out a set of certifications for people who produce thought leadership. So one of the interesting things that maybe prompted us to go in this direction was we heard from one of the reporters who it kind of talks about marketing and things like that, that he didn't want to talk about thought leadership because it was too squishy, he said. And I said, well, the whole point of, right? The whole point of this research is to de-squishify thought leadership, right? We said we really have to figure out a way to get this message sort of more broadly out there. And because I have background in a not-for-profit and a professional association, we said, yeah, that's probably one way we can do it. So let's give it a go. And APQC was all in. It's right aligned with their mission in terms of knowledge management and benchmarking and value delivery. So yeah, we're about a year and a half into the association, and it's going well.
That's incredible. Only a year and a half. That's amazing because when you look at the website, you look at who your board of advisors are. It's a who's who. And the companies that, I think it's quite useful, the list of companies that, are recognized as doing great thought leadership and a lot of great resources there. I love the fact that you're coming out with standards and certification as well. I mean, building a community is a really great way, obviously, to not only legitimize or not de-squishify what's already a very well proven discipline, but it also, obviously, it's a rising tide lifts all ships sort of thing, in that it reinforces the value of the great work that everyone's already doing, and can add to more value being created in the business world, right?
Indeed.
So
Yeah,
hats off
that's
to you,
exactly
and
right.
hats off to you all for performing that. Um, now I'd like to get your take on a few findings from our latest research report, which we're going to be releasing in mid-October, so very, very soon. It's called Answer Engine. It's about B2B thought leadership specifically. And the first thing I want to ask about is that we found that while two-thirds of B2B marketers use thought leadership for top of funnel, only 43% carry it all the way through to loyalty advocacy, right? So I'm curious if you've found the same in your own research or experience, and what do you think it's going to take to get marketers to think about thought leadership as something that extends across the entire customer lifecycle?
My perspective would be, and the way that we talk about thought leadership at IBM, but also within GTLI, is that it really is at the top of the funnel, and that it's designed to build that sort of awareness and, as I mentioned, consideration. But when you think of thought leadership as the platform, then it can carry you through the entire rest of the journey, because your marketing team is building assets that are using that thought leadership as the platform, as the foundation, as the engine,
Right.
as you mentioned. And that doesn't mean that you're using the thought leadership asset as the call to action. It means that your marketing team is building assets that are using it as the foundation, and that carries you through the funnel, right? So to your point about the
Exactly.
hub and spoke, we're right back there again. It's getting your marketing team to really embrace thought leadership as the engine, right? As the gasoline, as the this is the basis. Now take it and pull it apart and put it together in different ways that are going to encourage your audience, wherever they are in your journey, to continue to engage with you, right? So that's kind of how we think of the virtuous cycle of thought leadership, which is there's this basis report, there's this basis, survey, research, perspective, whatever it is, that forms that foundation, forms that platform. Again, back to the eighth P, that's why it's the platform. And then the marketing team takes that and uses it and builds and paints and creates and, um, it changes it in ways that keep the foundation intact from a credibility and a authority perspective, but then connects it through to that product and service portfolio within your organization that help generate leads and that help generate loyalty and that help, build business. So that's the cycle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the trust obviously is more important than ever, it seems like, and building trust through credible research, through credible, impartial, business. How can we solve a business problem? What directionally can we do to solve this business problem? Here's data-backed perspective on how one might do that. Now, that's, as you say, that's the platform. Now we can take that, the universal truths that might exist within that perspective, and then customize it for messaging that extends across other scenarios, contexts, audiences. Yeah, we're totally on the same page there. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was over a third of marketers that we surveyed say that original research is significantly more valuable than for building trust and authority than, let's say, AI generated content. I'm surprised it's not more than that, actually. But as AI content continues to change how content is discovered and consumed, whether it's content origination or generation to using AI platforms for discovery, I mean, I'm wondering if you feel like, and maybe we're both biased about this, I'll qualify my question a little bit, but do you think that because of that AI layer or multiple layers of AI and its influence on the modern information discovery and consumption experience, do you think the value of original content, original research and thought leadership content is going to increase? Is it going to become more important as a signal of credibility and trust?
Well, we do see that in the research actually, that executives value original research over third-party research, We did find an interesting thing when we did our first round of AI research back in early 2023. So just a few months after ChatGPT kind of, sprung itself on the world. And executives at that point said they thought they would trust thought leadership more if it was produced by AI than if it wasn't. Now that's changed dramatically in the last
Interesting.
2.5 years. But we speculate, and we continue to study this, but we speculate that it was because early on, the way that sort of AI and generative AI was positioned was that it would eliminate bias. Well, we learned pretty quickly that it wasn't going to eliminate bias, that it was just going to reflect bias. And so I think that executives, quickly changed their perspective. But to your original question, I do think that research and the perspective that's based on that research is going to continue to be important. And we see it in particular with the answer engine optimization that's happening now. So I mean, we're seeing about a 30% drop off of, visitors to our website because people are using answer engines to get the answer they need and they're never going to the originating site. So everyone is trying to figure out how to get their content, available on these answer engines. And one way that seems to be effective right now is to be that sort of credible resource. And one way to do that is to have the research that's behind it. So, we're seeing a lot of data that's showing that that research-based, research-backed, data-oriented thought leadership is much more influential and much more credible than other kinds of, you know, content. Some HBR calls it something recently, slop, some kind of slop. So
AI slop.
yeah, something like that.
Well, it's interesting. It occurs to me then that the engine or flywheel or hub and spoke of thought leadership, derivative content is going to be even more valuable because a lot of what AI overviews in Google and what the large language models are doing is they're answering those high level top of funnel types of questions and not generating any clicks. So it's imperative that you create a foundation of research-based thought leadership, absolutely, and you create brand visibility, maybe not clicks, but you certainly create trust and credibility with that kind of content. But then it is that flywheel of more mid-funnel, end of funnel, and after post-sale content that you can create inspired by, informed by that research that you will be able to achieve differentiated and more compelling attention that is going to fuel pipeline inevitably, right?
Yeah, and for B2B organizations where we're using in fact, and we're seeing our colleagues use it as well, AI is, not many folks are using it in production of thought leader, not many credible folks are using it in production of thought leadership because it just doesn't get you where you need to go. It'll give you some ideas on topics, but it's not gonna get you that credible kind of perspective that you need. But where it is incredibly valuable is in the extension pieces, in the derivative assets that you mentioned. So, for example, if you're doing, we talked about the hub and spoke. If you're doing a major study, let's say on consumer purchasing for the holidays. You might do a survey that encompasses 10,000 consumers from 25 countries and, doing jobs in 12 different industries. But you don't have the resources to actually build out assets for each of those countries. That's what AI can do for you, right? Because you've already got the data, you've already got the information, you've already got the insight. Then AI can take it and do the routine sort of production of a deck that shows what's different between, the US and Singapore, for example, with respect to holiday purchasing. So that's where I think that hub and spoke can really be the flywheel that you mentioned, using AI in a way that's not inauthentic or that's not offensive to
Right,
someone
right.
who's really looking for that credible, kind of authoritative thought leadership from a trusted brand.
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking about the site flywheel idea and, distribution of content, thought leadership content. And, this connects to one of the other findings I wanted to ask you about. So we found that, companies are heavily distributing their thought leadership specifically on LinkedIn, as you can imagine, YouTube and webinars. But interestingly, the B2B marketers that answered the survey said that their consumption on those channels is substantially lower. And at the same rate, it's like 32% mentioned that Gen AI tools are being used as discovery sources when they themselves are discovering and consuming content. So I'm just wondering what you think about, how B2B marketing leaders should consider how they align their content distribution with actual consumption, as it relates to AI.
Yeah, well, I don't think answer engines are going away. I think they're here to stay. So we do need to figure out what the answer is there. I'm not sure that anybody's figured it out yet. In fact, I'm pretty sure nobody has figured it out yet, but
Yeah.
everybody's thinking about it. And the LinkedIn stat you mentioned probably explains why their algorithm changed in favor of keeping people on the site instead of putting links in to send them off the site. So, um, you know, I think the message for thought leadership producers and for marketers in general is just to keep on top of it, and you have to have a distribution strategy that changes as users experiences change, that the way that users access your content changes.
I was gonna say, there's, a new paper that was released by folks at LinkedIn talking about a major update. So they've generated their own foundational model. So right now they use disparate models to do different things you can do on LinkedIn, in terms of interacting, surfacing content on the feed, jobs, LinkedIn Learning, whatever. And they've developed their own singular foundational model for an AI platform for doing these sorts of things. And in looking at that paper, I thought leadership and original perspectives and ideas really stood out as what it wants to surface, right? And what interesting too is that taking less into account how many followers you have and taking more into account the context in which information is presented. You know what I mean? So that's so what does that translate to for a business that doesn't have a CEO with 100,000 followers can compete, so to speak, on ideas when they're bringing original ideas to the marketplace if they and also especially video and formats that are more, engaging, polls and inspiring discussion and that sort of thing. Which of course, when you're bringing original data-backed ideas, that is a prime for generating discussion, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that their model is, that they want you to keep all of that on the platform. So that's where B2B marketers are going to have to figure out what the balance is, right? Because we want them on our platform. LinkedIn wants them on their platform. So what's the balance, and how do you work that through? So um not a lot different than it ever has been, but I think it's just accelerated lately.
So, on the topic of AI, there's something that has come up for me, and that is the idea of synthetic data. And, there are a small number of companies, but probably a growing number of companies will collect a sample of customer surveys, bring that into their AI platform, and then tell their customer, okay, we've extrapolated from this to simulate 4,000 responses or 1,000 responses or something like that. And I'm just kind of curious, what you think about the idea of synthetic data. Does it have a role? What role might it play in its current state?
Yeah. Like many organizations, we're investigating the use of synthetic data because like answer engines, it's here. It's not going to go away. So we need to figure out what it means and where the best uses of it are. We don't have the answers yet, but I think what we're seeing is that it does have immense value. Back to the hub and spoke thing is if you've done a survey with 4,000 executives around the world, and you want to talk about a very niche part of that survey population, let's say um, telco CEOs in Singapore in small and medium sized enterprises, right? There aren't very many of them, number one. Um, but you want to be able to understand if what you're presenting as part of data is valid for that niche segment. And I think that's where synthetic data might have a lot of value. We don't, as I said, we don't really know yet, but there is going to be a place for synthetic data to play as part of the spoke. I wouldn't see, at least in the near term, synthetic data replacing real surveys or real, kind of interactions with human executives, let's say, if that's your target audience. But I do think there's a role for it to play in those derivative areas. We just have to figure out what that role is.
Yeah, it's sort of reconciling the what is the current capability of that technology and, testing to see where it's gonna work, because it's gonna work somewhere.
That's
I
right.
think just like other tools, other technologies, it's a matter of the evolution of the technology as well as the best use cases.
That's right.
But I agree with you, it's inevitable.
Yeah. And
So
what
let's
you don't want to do, Lee, is risk
Wow.
your credibility just
Right.
because it's faster or it's cheaper. That for a thought leadership producing organization should really be kind of job one, is making sure that their credibility is intact, that their customers, that their prospects can trust them. You mentioned trust earlier, and we haven't really talked about that, but it's an essential part of thought leadership is building that trusted relationship. Our research found that purchasers, CEOs or CXOs in the C-suite that are making purchases trust on average 5 organizations that they get their thought leadership from. So it's not the same 5. Depends on the industry, depends on the location, all that. But every thought leadership producer has the opportunity to be one of those 5. And it's based on trust and credibility and independence and research and perspective and all those things we've already talked about. Uh, but you're not going to win that if you move too quickly into something like synthetic data.
Agreed, agreed. And the whole point of creating thought leadership is to build trust and, you know, um and as in the current environment that we're in, trust is more valuable than ever. Um and so yeah, I agree with you. And that what you shared about they trust 5 companies, like that's really interesting. That's really kind of interesting. So let's kind of break out Cindy's crystal ball and look ahead. What's one change that you would like to see in how B2B brands approach thought leadership in the coming year?
I would love to see every B2B brand calculate their own ROI and start to position it as an authoritative and a valid way to measure the impact and the value that thought leadership provides to their organization. It's going to take a little while to get our CFOs to buy it. So we need
Yeah.
to start now.
Well, the investment they can make is in this book because there's a framework in here. So check it out, people.
I think the
All
more
right.
the more the more we speak their language, Lee, the
Yeah.
more we help ourselves not have to, answer questions about the value of what we deliver to the organization every day.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And and it's our responsibility. If we are taking funding to do things, it's our responsibility to show that this is an investment, and therefore there's a return. So our operation needs to be structured such that we can deliver that information. I agree with that. I do. So let's wrap things up with something that goes beyond B2B. And since we're going to be publishing this podcast in early October, Halloween month, right, in the US, do they celebrate Halloween in Singapore? I don't know.
Oh
As,
gosh, yeah,
and so,
we don't have as far as I know, we don't have trick or treating, but Halloween
yeah,
is big. There's Halloween stuff all over, yeah, Singapore. So yes, we do celebrate here.
great, great. So I want to ask, what's the scariest thing you've ever done?
Gosh. Um so I've been trying to learn Chinese for 25 years or so. And I started taking courses
Chongguaren,
at
yay.
at a university. Um, and my professor convinced me to do a 3-minute introduction in Chinese at a Chinese New Year celebration in front of 300 Chinese families, which I
Oh my
did
goodness.
and was terrified. And stunned the entire room into silence. And I still don't know to this day whether they were silent because they were so impressed by my wonderful Chinese, or if they were wondering who this idiot was standing on stage crucifying the language. But it was terrifying.
I'm sure they were impressed because any American who can say more than ni hao or xie or something like that, oh my goodness, you right?
Yeah, well, that's
Um,
my hope. That's what I'd like to believe.
I'm sure
So
that's the case. Great. Well, my wife is Chinese, and so unfortunately, I know I can't speak 3 minutes. I can't speak 10 seconds, so I need to rectify that. Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. Where can people? Where's a good place, the best place for people to connect with you?
People can connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with anybody who's interested in thought leadership on LinkedIn. So you can find me there, Cindy W. Anderson. There are a lot of us. Cindy and Anderson are pretty common names. So just if you put in IBM, you should find me pretty easily. And you can find the book on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk to you.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you can stay tuned for our next interesting guest. And remember, there's no better time than now to break free of boring B2B.